Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming today. I hope everyone is enjoying AutoEnter Live so far. In this session, we're going to explore the Google Maps API and how you can integrate it into your app. A little bit about me. I come from a large, heavily scientific family. Think physicists, engineers, a fighter pilot, some programmers. So naturally, I chose engineering to study in college. But I quickly switched to business after a few semesters. Then I spent 10 or so years working in marketing and graphic design, using FileMaker to organize everything. Eventually, I decided I liked the FileMaker development more than I liked the marketing, and I joined Soliant in 2006, and I never looked back. Last year, we made the pandemic move to Florida, so when I'm not working, you'll find me out cycling, out on the stand-up paddleboard, at the beach, or doing home improvements. Why maps? Well, there are a lot of reasons you might use a map in your FileMaker application. Maybe you have a construction business and need to help your crews know where to go. Or perhaps you need to display some landmarks around a location to help promote your business. Or you need to aid schedulers in planning delivery routes. Anything you can dream up. Today, we'll explore the basic version, which is a Google Maps object built into the webviewer. Then we'll review some drawbacks you may encounter while using that, and how we can overcome these obstacles by integrating with the Google Maps API. Finally, we'll take a look at some fancier implementations to give you an idea of what's possible. You may have seen and used the built-in Google Maps options in the WebViewer setup. You just feed it an address, and you'll get a map just like you would using Google Maps in a web browser. However, there are some limitations. As you'll see, the pop-up control is open by default. You have no control over this default display. Icons will be Google's default. The pop-up control is visible, points of interest are displayed. It can start looking a little busy. Even worse, if you're intending to show a small thumbnail size map, the map will be completely obscured by the pop-out control. There's also the issue of giving users unlimited control. In order to allow them to interact with the map at all, you have to enable interaction with the web viewer. But this means they can do whatever they want, and your map will quickly descend into chaos. Maybe that's okay. You can have a button to reset the web viewer, but usually you're showing a map for a purpose. You also might need two-way interaction between the map and FileMaker, which is just not possible with the built-in map option. Thankfully, there's a better way. Enter the Google Maps API. There are several ways to integrate with the API from FileMaker. First, you could write all of the JavaScript, CSS, HTML, and everything that is needed to display custom maps in a web viewer, just as you would for a website. Or you can use an open source tool called Claris to quickly assemble the pieces needed to integrate with the API and display your map. I'll explain more about Claris in a minute. First, some setup. You'll need a developer account on the Google Maps platform. The site will walk you through everything you need to do to get going. Yes, it's going to ask you to set up a billing account with a credit card, but they offer a $200 credit per month, which equates to tens of thousands of API calls a month, so you're not likely to see any usage charges. Once you've gone through the setup process, you'll create a new project. After naming it, select the new project if it's not already selected. Then click Create Credentials. Select API key for the credential type and copy the resulting key. You'll need to use this key when calling the API from FileMaker. You can always get to the API keys in the dashboard under Credentials. Carafe is an open source project developed by some of my colleagues at Soliant. It facilitates creating, sharing, and deploying JavaScript components in FileMaker. There are two methods for displaying Carafe components. Carafe Kitchen, which is a FileMaker file that helps you create and deploy them, or the Carafe add-on. We're going to go with the Carafe add-on to get our map integration set up quickly. If you're not familiar with add-ons, you'll see that there's an Add-ons tab in Layout mode. If you click plus, FileMaker does ship with some standard ones, but we're going to need to install a custom add-on to use the Carafe add-on. The add-on files are going to need to be placed into the add-on modules folder that's inside your application support folder. This is a hidden folder, and it's easy to get to if you go to Preferences, Plugins, Reveal Plugin folder. This puts you close to the place where you need to be. We're going to want to go up a couple of levels. So you see we're in our user library, application support, and then the FileMaker folder. We have an extensions folder in here, and then there is what's called add-on modules. You can see by default there's nothing in this folder. This is only for custom add-ons. So we're going to go to the Carafe website, go to Downloads, download the add-on, and we'll go ahead and open that up. And we have a folder here. This is what we're going to need to place into the add-on modules folder. We can just take this unzipped folder and drag it right into there. Now, in order to get access to it, we're going to have to restart FileMaker. Back to layout mode. Now when we hit the plus, we have Carafe available to us. We'll just click Choose. And in order to make use of the add-on, all we need to do is drag this onto a layout. We can resize it. We might want it to get big when our window gets big. And let's save that. Go back to browse mode. You see we have this configure button. And we're looking for the Google Maps add-on. Right, we already have it bundled up for us. Let's click install. Go to the details of it. Download that. It is downloaded, and back to details to configure it. So our webviewer object name, we want it to be this. It actually already is. When we dragged the add-on on, it gave it this name. If we want to test with sample data, we want to copy this button into our solution. Layout mode. Paste the button. We can just put it here for now. Okay, now that we have the button, click that, and you can see that it maps it with sample data. Now we need to customize the bundle loader so it uses dynamic record data. Let's go back to the configurator and copy the bundle loader script. Then we'll paste it into our script workspace. Let's go back to the configurator. You can see there's different ways of triggering your script, and you'll need the bundle ID in order to target it. We can close the configurator now, and we can delete the HTML from the web viewer. Now we'll start with the loader script that we pasted in. First, we're going to want to disable the sample data steps and enable the dynamic data steps. You can see it already put in our bundle ID and our web viewer object name. For the file name, we can just say get file name here. For the Google API key, I've stored it in a custom function. We'll call that custom function here. So you see, here's my function. So for the map data, this is going to be drawn from a field that I use to calculate out the JSON that we need to feed into it. So it's going to have the color, the ID, the label, the position, which is the coordinates, and a title. So let's call that field here. It needs to be formatted as a JSON array. So put our array markers here. Then we're going to stick that map marker data in there, and the marker data is a JSON object. Okay, so for minimum cluster size, I know that with my data, 5 is going to work. The script name, this is a script that would be called when you click on a marker. I've already written one, so we'll call that one here. And use FMP URL, this is a Boolean. We're just going to set it to false. Before we test our loader script, I want to show you a couple of other scripts that we need. First, when sending marker data to the Google Maps API, we need to represent the address as geographical coordinates, otherwise known as latitude and longitude. The JavaScript bundle is expecting a JSON object with 2 elements, lat and long. How does one get coordinates from an address? Conveniently, our Maps platform account also gives us access to the Google geocoding API, which takes an address input and returns a bunch of information about that address. This is a sample of what you get back when you call the geocoding API with an address. The one we're interested in here is the geometry section, and then location, and this object right here with lat and long. If your account does not have the geocoding API enabled, you can enable it by going to APIs. It will list your APIs here. You can see I have an additional API, which is the geocoding API. I'll click on that, and I'll tell it to enable it. Takes a minute. Now you can see the geocoding API is listed with the other enabled APIs. Now, onto our script. So when we give an address to the geocoding API, we want to get and store the coordinates back in the coordinates field. So I've written a script here. This is going to send an address. This is a custom function that I wrote that just takes inputs of address, city, state, and zip and puts them in comma delimited format, which is what the API is looking for. And then we set up our URL here. The URL to call is this one, the googleapis.com, maps, API, geocode, JSON, and then our parameters that we're going to send it are address, and key would be our API key, which is stored in custom function. So then we use insert from URL to call the API and get our big chunk of JSON back. And then you see here we're setting the coordinates to from the results. The first element or first array element in the result, we want the geometry location, and that will be that lat and long element. So we set that into our coordinates field, commit that, and then we're done. So I can demonstrate that by deleting this here, and then we'll run the script, and you see it pulled our latitude and longitude for us. The other script we're going to need if you remember, our parameters that we sent into the loader is that when we click on a marker on the map, we want it to do something. So my data set here is all of the previous DevCon locations. So when the user clicks on the map, we're going to present them with a question, and we're going to ask them if they attended that conference or not, and they can say yes or no, and then we'll store that result in a field called attendance. So walking through this, the parameter that we're getting is going to be the ID. So the bundle was set so that when you click on a marker, it is just going to send the ID as a quoted string. And then using that ID, we are going to pull the year, which is stored, as you see, in the name last field. So this is just doing execute SQL. This is a function that we use often when we need to do very simple SQL. And it's going to pull name last when the primary key equals the ID that we sent. You'll see the substitute here is because when the bundle sent us the ID, it was a quoted string. Put up a dialog, say, mark your attendance. Did you attend DevCon in year, which we captured earlier? And then our buttons are yes and no. So I'm going to do all this work in a new window. We'll freeze that window so that the user doesn't really notice much. And we'll find our record by ID. And assuming we found something, we will set the attendance field based on their choice. So if their last message choice was 1, and a reminder to ourselves that that was the yes button, then we'll set it to yes. Otherwise, we'll set it to no. Commit that, close that window, and exit the script. So let's see if our entire script works. So first, the map this record, this is going to call our loader script, which will then call the rendering script. Okay, so it rendered our record here, DevCon in San Antonio. So it was called DevCon 2014. That comes from the label field, which was name first and name last. And when I hover over it, it gives us a little bit more information. It gives us adds the street address to the name first and name last. And then finally, if I click on this, it will ask if I attended it. And we will say yes, because I did. Let's make it change. We'll say no. You can see that it changes that. And that is it working properly. We're going to add one more feature to this script that we wrote, and that is to map the entire found set. I have a different layout here that is a master detail layout, so this shows all of them. You can see we end up changing which record we're on here. So the little change that we're going to make is when we set in our loader, or the one that showed the current record, just sent the marker data from that one record. So when we want to do the found set, we're going to change that up a little bit, and we're going to send that as an array of all of the records in the found set. The way we're going to accomplish that is I made a summary field that is the list of type. So it's going to do a list of marker data. That's going to give us a return delimited list of all of the marker data in our found set. And when we set map data, we're just going to make it a little bit conditional here. So if we sent in a parameter of set, then we are going to use marker data summary field, the list of, and we're going to substitute out the carriage returns and put in commas instead and wrap that in array markers. Otherwise, we'll do like we did before and it will do the current record. So, demonstrate that change. We've got our found set here. As I mentioned before, this is all of the previous years of in-person DevCon. So if we say found set, then you can see everywhere that DevCon has been. Several of them have been in the same place, so we end up with some overlapping clustering here. Zoom out a bit. Let's look at, how about one of the San Diegos? Let's look at San Diego 2013. So it does the same thing, runs our script that we call when we click a marker. Asks if we went to 2013. I'm going to say yes, because I believe I did attend that one as well. And if we look for the 2013 record on that, and it marked it to yes. Let's take a look at some of the possibilities in practice. This map was part of a scheduling solution for a company that installs and services solar panels. They wanted to view jobs that are scheduled, those shown in colors, and those ready to be scheduled, which are shown in gray, in order to help reduce drive time between jobs. Because the skill sets differ, they also needed to know the type of job and who's been assigned. As a side note, there is more to this interface in the actual solution, but the real meat of it is the map. The buttons along the top were mocked up to mimic some actions that result from clicking on records or buttons in the rest of the interface. The icons are derived from the job type. For example, the courier is shown as a cyclist, installs are shown as trucks, and service calls are represented by a wrench. The upside down truck was chosen by the client to indicate that an install had something wrong and has to be fixed for any number of reasons. The color of the icon is associated with the team member, and in the rest of the interface, there's a portal that shows the color swatch next to the team member. We also removed some extraneous map features, such as points of interest markers. They just interfered with the custom markers, and they weren't helpful for scheduling. We used some calls to the new script step, perform JavaScript in webviewer, to change the display of the map without having to regather the data and redraw the map. This enabled things like showing only a selected marker, animating a marker, or once the user has been scrolling around for a while, we can quickly recenter and fit it to bounds. Clicking on a marker shows an info window. This is a Google Maps feature. We could have chosen to call a FileMaker script that displays a card window, but using the info window keeps it tied to the marker, which is a nicer user experience. When you click on Task Detail, this would normally show a card window with the details about the task. I've wired it up just to capture the ID and to hide the rest of the icons. The Reschedule Task button would normally take the task and give you options to reschedule it. So I'll use the task ID that we just captured, show the rest of the icons again, and animate this marker. That's all I have time to show you today. I hope this session will help you get started with your own Google Maps implementations. I've listed some resources here, and I believe the slides will be available online after the conference. Thanks for coming. Please feel free to contact me if you have any questions, and have a great rest of the conference.